Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for EVE Echoes. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at one of the pirate faction battleships, this time around the Angel Cartel's Machariel. Now I flew this fairly extensively back in the final test in June-July, and I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not normally a fan of the bigger, slower ships personally, but the Machariel felt like an absolute beast, and it feels fantastic to be back in the capsule, so to speak, piloting one now to showcase for all you guys. So what we're going to do in this video then is have a look at what makes the Machariel, what its stats are, its attributes, its ship bonuses, all that kind of thing. We're then going to put that together with a fitting guide, then take it out for a spin at the end with a combat demonstration. So if you do enjoy this video, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell to never miss an upload, and of course let me know what topics and ships you want me to cover in future videos by commenting below. Now as well, if you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, you can do so by joining us on Patreon, and I finally have a merchandise shop up and running on Redbubble. There's a link in the description below, and new designs will be added soon. So if you fancy representing your love of the Catskull Academy, then do check out the different t-shirts, hoodies, even phone cases, and more stuff on that link below. Anyway folks, that said and done then, let's talk about the Angel Cartel Machariel. The Angel Cartel are one of the 5 pirate factions currently available in EVE Echoes, alongside the Blood Raider Covenant, Sanchez Nation, Guristas Pirates, and the Serpentis Corporation. And many of you will know that the Angel Cartel are ultimately my favourite, with the Blood Raider Covenant very close second, although the Ashamu does win as my favourite of the cruisers. Anyway, now the Angel Cartel themselves are kind of like the Mafia. They're an organised crime syndicate, very family orientated, with a lot of, they've got their fingers in a lot of different pies, whether it's things like racketeering, whether it's loan sharking, gambling, drug trafficking, prostitution, fraud, arms dealing, you name it, the Angel Cartel are probably involved somewhere. But they do tend to look after their own. If you're part of the cartel, they will protect you, they will look after you, and this often actually leads to kind of this interesting sort of relationship with the Minmatar Republic. At one point in EVE's backstory, an entire star system, Scarcon, defects from the Minmatar Republic and actually joins the Angel Cartel and accepts the Angel Cartel as sort of the ruling faction in that system. That's kind of how they work. They offer what no one else can, but then ultimately aim to get you hooked on their product too. So not only are you working for them, but you're putting the money right back into the family business, so to speak. Now anyway, that means of course the Angel Cartel are based down in Minmatar space. So if you're in the southeast of the galaxy, of the cluster, that's where you'll find Angel anomalies, Angel combat anomalies. And if you're out in the nullsec down that way, like say Cache or the Great Wildlands, you'll tend to find Angel Cartel dead space anomalies. If you clear those dead space anomalies, amongst the loot you'll find Angel debris, and you can use that debris to reverse engineer the blueprints for the Dramiel, the Cinnabal, and of course the Machariel. Now the Machariel is the battleship. This, it being a faction battleship, is a very expensive ship. The material cost for this is absolutely insane. Even the price to switch the oven on is eye-watering, but with good reason. Actually looks really cool as well. I love the way this ship looks. Again, it is a dual hull design, which I really liked. Mostly symmetrical, just with some of the propulsion units there off-center. You've got the big one here on the left-hand side. But anyway, let's have a look at its attributes and fittings. So the Machariel has 2 drone tubes. They can launch small, medium, or large drones. We've got 8 high slots, 4 mid slots, 6 low slots, and then 3 of each of both the power grid combat rigs and mechanical rigs. Now the power grid output as well is absolutely monstrous on the Machariel there. You can see 12,353 megawatts, and it kind of needs that if you want to put large strike cannons on this thing, because you guys know how power grid hungry strike cannons can be. You can imagine what the large ones are like. So we need a large power grid to be able to actually fit all of that in. Defensively speaking as well, this is pretty beasty. 98,483 effective hit points, and interestingly, this is fairly evenly spread. You've got a shield of 27,749, and armour of 27,749, and the structure only lags behind ever so slightly at 24,547. Now, what this actually means is that, like the Cinnabal and the Dramiel, the Machariel can be shield tanked and it can be armor tanked depending on what you're going up against or what your skills are based in. So if you want to shield tank it, you can do. If you want to armor tank it, you can do. And when we come to the fitting section later, you can obviously swap the modules around. Instead of armor repairers, you put shield boosters. Instead of adaptive invulnerability fields, you put adaptive armor hardener, that kind of thing. Just switch them around as needed. Now, looking at the rest of its stats here, being a battleship, it can lock up to 7 targets, so it's worth training into target management. Signature radius of this thing is monstrous at 247 meters, though in fairness, I say monstrous, that is actually pretty small as far as battleships go. Again, that's a recurring theme of the Angel Cartel. Their signature radiuses tend to be very low. Flight velocity of 139 as well is kind of middling to what you'd expect from a battleship. Scan resolution is pathetic, sadly. 143 meters means it's going to take an awful long time to lock onto anything, especially the smaller, faster things like frigates and destroyers will take a long time to lock onto those. Warp speed of 2.0 astronomical units per second does actually get a bonus increase later, so pretend that that actually says 3.5, which makes it one of the fastest to redeploy battleships out there. And certainly its mass and its inertia modifier are deceptive as well. The Machariel, as far as battleships go, is rather agile. It's able to turn not on the spot by any stretch, but it is fairly nimble. Anyway, let's look at then the trait descriptions. Being an Angel Cartel vessel, we've got that roll bonus, 50% warp speed, hence I said 3.5 astronomical units per second, because obviously it's an extra 50% onto the 2 shown. We get a 50% warp acceleration, which means how fast you achieve warp and actually move through warp speed, and a 5-second increase to damage control activation time. Now, this last bit there, the damage control activation time, is kind of a sad little thing for me, because quite frankly, it only really affects the Dramiel. The Cinnabal and the Machariel, there's very little reason to ever fit a damage control unit as it currently stands, and an additional 5 seconds of it just isn't worth fitting one. I'd rather take any other low slot pretty much than take a damage control unit here on a Machariel. Who knows, maybe one day that will get changed or things will be shifted around, who knows. Anyway, as with all of the other of the faction battleships, you have skill bonuses here from both Advanced Battleship Command and from Advanced Large Weapon Operation. Now obviously with the Machariel, that's Advanced Large Cannon Operation. So if you like your cannons, the Machariel is the battleship for you. 5% increased large cannon damage, and a 5% reduction to large cannon activation time. That's obviously at full 5, a 25% extra damage, and 25% faster firing cannons. Whoa, that's a tough sentence to say. Faster firing cannons. Now this, like the Cinnabal, has this effect of making your shots do more damage and you're rapidly shooting more of them. This basically turns the Machariel into a gigantic Gatling cannon, and my goodness, the damage you'll see is absolutely terrifying. Now, Advanced Battleship Command, again, like the Cinnabal, increases the large cannon tracking speed and large cannon accuracy fall-off. Extra range, which helps you apply the damage better, and extra tracking, which makes it easier for you to stay stuck onto a target and actually hit it whilst it's moving. This is all straight up large cannon damage. Everything that this ship does is geared towards putting more large cannon shells onto the battlefield, into your opponent, and more making those bigger and more powerful shells. With stats and skill bonuses like that, of course the Machariel that I'm going to showcase is an up-close and personal Captain Benzie special autocannon brawling build, which of course means our 8 eye slots here are all large autocannons, in this case Gist C-type, because if you're going to be flying something like a Machariel, you need to outfit it with the very best that money can buy, otherwise what really is the point? Now the DPS that these are putting out, as you can see, 240 DPS per turret. That's absolutely monstrous. In fact, that's giving us 1,916 DPS across the board, not including the drone. That's cold, that's not with anything activated. That is absolutely insane damage. Now, the downside to, of course, large autocannons, first of all, is the optimal range. 7.54 kilometers is a very short range for a battleship, but it does have a very long gradual accuracy fall-off of 47.43 kilometers. So in fairness, as long as you're in sort of the 10 to 30 kilometer margin, you should still be applying very strong damage to your target. So that's not a huge downside. The bigger downside is very much the tracking speed. 11.96 is absolutely abysmal. Let's be honest, that is absolutely abysmal. It's better than most large turrets are. I mean, it's certainly better than strike cannons or beams and things like that, but it is still a very slow speed, and you are going to struggle to hit things like destroyers, frigates, and even some cruisers. I mean, heck, I was in an anomaly earlier with this, and I was just trying out different fits, and I hadn't properly considered mid-slots, and I went up against an elite Gistum Cyclone, and I even struggled to hit that. Which, of course, that segues us nicely into talking about our mid-slots, because propulsion jamming is just one part of making your targets easier to hit, and we do that in this case with a Predator Warp Scrambler. This, of course, 15km range, will allow us to lock a target down in PvP, but for PvE, it switches off micro warp drives. So if an enemy rat is using a micro warp drive, you can hit them with the Warp Scrambler. Suddenly, they are much easier to take out because they don't have the micro warp drive anymore, they're moving slower. Then, of course, you can 1-2 punch them with the Predator Stasis Webifier. Not only do they not have a micro warp drive thanks to your Scrambler, they now have a 61% reduced flight velocity on top of that. They are now an absolute sitting duck. But hey, if that wasn't enough for you, why don't we make their signature radius bigger by 38.75% as well, thanks to the Halley Target Painter. So now we've got a ship that is moving considerably slower, and it is a bigger target. That should make it considerably easier to hit. And yes, of course, that 38.75 is only applicable within 36 kilometers. It starts to fall off beyond that. But 36 kilometers is within that 10 to 30 that I mentioned earlier as our ideal position for the Machariel to be in. Now, the fourth and final of the mid-slots to talk about here is a Vrykolakus large energy Nosferatu, and here we can see 19.2 kilometers optimal range. In fact, let's have a look at the one fitted to the ship, because that will take my skill bonuses into account as well. There we are, 24 kilometer optimal range, 14 kilometer accuracy fall off. Again, we should be in range of this at all times, therefore we're going to be able to drain our opponent's capacitor and keep ours fueled. Very useful since, as I'm sure you can see already, there are a lot of active tanking modules in the low slots. Before we talk about those though, I just want to spend a brief moment talking about drones here. Now, you'll see that I've put into the launch tubes, because these are large launch tubes, they can take small, medium and large drones. I have fitted Mark 7 Berserkers into the top slots. Those aren't necessarily your best options. Those do struggle, it's not like medium drones here, those do struggle to hit the smaller and faster moving targets. So I also have a full complement here of Mark 7 Valkyries in the drone bay that I can swap to if I'm struggling. If you find that you're getting elites or a lot of like interceptors and things like that coming for you, you can swap out those Berserkers for Valkyries or Infiltrators instead of whatever the Mar one's called, otherwise Ogres going down to Hobgoblins, that kind of thing, Wasps to Hornets. Use whatever is best for the situation. You may even want to put some small drones in there just to make sure you are absolutely capable of hitting the smallest and fastest of moving targets. Now anyway, into the low slots then. As I said, we have active tank here, and the defense of this Machariel, 142,859 across the board, and you'll see that both my shield and armor there are 40,155. Now ultimately, whatever you're fighting is going to depend what type of tank you go for here. Obviously also your skills. If you are skilled majorly into shield tanking, then yeah, fit your Machariel mainly with shield tanking equipment. Here you can see I've gone for an armor tank. This is basically because I'm intending to go up against things like a Mar anomalies, etc. with this. Also, I just enjoy armor tanking because I think a lot of people don't think of the Machariel, the Cinnable, or the Dromiel as being possibly armor tanked, but here is kind of the proof of the pudding. Now, obviously we do this with a Corpus C-type large armor repairer, and this is of course the armor repairer that we're going to use to actually repair any damage that we take, and then we've got two C-type adaptive armor hardeners as well to keep running and minimize the amount of damage we actually take. Now again, if you want to go shield tanking, you just swap the repairer for a shield booster, and you swap the adaptive armor hardeners for adaptive invulnerability fields. Simple as that. The other low slots then, two Eagle tracking computers. These increase the range, both the optimal and the accuracy fall-off ranges of our turrets, plus the tracking speed there, and we can activate each of these for a 500% boost to all three of those modifiers there, which means if you really need to hit something that is a little bit further out of your range, you can activate one or both of these tracking computers for a massive boost to range, and if something is proving too hard to hit, even with the scrambler, the web of fire, and the target painter on them, you can hit both of the tracking computers and get that tracking speed adjustment bonus to hopefully help just give enough little tracking speed boost there to actually blap whatever target you're after. Finally then, this is a bit of a contentious point. I've gone for a core C-type large afterburner. This to me is enough for moving around the battlefield, getting into position, and sort of just keeping myself moving. The Machariel is a fairly nimble ship, as I mentioned before, as far as battleships go. I prefer the afterburner simply because I like the longevity of it. If you are going for a PvP fit, you may wish to switch this for a large micro warp drive instead. Understand that that will obviously negatively impact your capacitor. It takes more capacitor to fuel it, and having it fitted drops your capacitor capacity by 25%, but in PvP, it does allow you to close that gap that little bit faster. And you obviously, even with autocannons as your main fit, you can be out of scram range against most things and just web them and scram them yourself to sort of keep them under control. It can go either way. For PvE, I think the afterburner is a better option, but you can theoretically go for a micro warp drive too. Anyway, let's have a look then at the rigs. For the power grid or combat rigs, I've gone for a cannon collision accelerator and a cannon burst aerator. Now, having these two combined is the best increase to cannon DPS you can get. Obviously, they do have a penalty for stacking both of them, so if you were to go for 2 burst, it's not as good as a burst and a collision, and a 2 collision is not as good as a collision and a burst. Mix them up. You get faster firing and higher damage, which gives overall better DPS. Now the third slot here, I tend to go for either a nanobot accelerator or the shield equivalent, the one that allows you just to repair that little bit faster, because obviously the large shield boosters and the large armor repairers do have long activation times. I want to make those go a little bit quicker to help me stay topped up on any damage that I do happen to take. Here, of course, I've got a nanobot accelerator because I'm currently using an armor tanking fit. I would swap that in such case as I change to shield. Now, fortunately, they're very cheap on the market, so you can actually do that. Now, for the mechanical rigs, auxiliary thrusters give us that additional speed. As I said, the Machariel is actually a fairly nimble battleship, or nimble for a battleship at least. And with the auxiliary thrusters fitted here, you can see that thanks to my skills, we've got 229.35 meters per second. Still not by any definition fast, but it's just that little bit better at getting into combat and it's staying in range with your guns. Then I've gone for a targeting system subcontroller, bit of an unusual one to fit here, simply because, as I said, battleships have incredibly slow lock-on time. The Machariel is no exception. It was, what, 140 meters, not even? So it takes a long time to lock on. Here, having an increase to your scan resolution just means that you lock on that little bit faster, and you can actually swap to the correct targets. And finally then, a semiconductor memory cell wraps things up nicely by just giving us a bit extra maximum capacitor capacity. It means our capacitor lasts longer and recharges slightly more aggressively. You can see this fit is actually capacitor stable. It's tenuously capacitor stable. It's capacitor stable until someone interferes with you. It's very easy to destabilize this capacitor. That is something you are going to have to pay attention to, but again, you shouldn't need to have every single one of those modules running at once. Just use the ones you need, and of course cannons don't require any form of capacitor to use, so those aren't eating your capacitor either, which kind of helps in case something does come along and completely destabilizes you. Work out if you can kill them before your tank fails. Basically, if you can kill them before the tank fails, well, you start recharging naturally afterwards anyway. So it's just a point there to consider in fairness with any cannon-based ship. To showcase the Machariel in action in PvE, I wanted to showcase it in Angel or Devil, which is a Tech 10 storyline encounter. Normally a very difficult piece of content to complete on your own, definitely designed for fleet work. Here, however, I'm going to showcase the Machariel as we go into Wave 3 of the third part of this. This is when you start to get some really nasty elites, and I want to showcase how things can go wrong and show how you can still actually deal with those. Now, first things first here, as we're getting towards the end of Wave 2, I'm still sitting very centralised to the entire combat anomaly. What I would normally suggest is leading this final target well away from the fight, blowing it up from range, and having some distance, because as you can see now, everything here spawns in about 3 kilometers away from me, which means I'm right in the centre of it all. I've got that elite Gisty there is already scrambling me. I've got 2 scrams on, and 2 webs, 2 Nosferatus, and 2 target painters. There's a whole lot of stuff here going on. It's taking time to lock onto the targets I want to, and I need to then scroll up and down the ship menu here to actually find which target I'm going for. And as you can see, I'm going for a rupture first of all, which is not the target I want to be going for. I want to be getting rid of these scrams first. That wastes a lot of time for me trying to find a target, and I'm stuck in the middle of this cluster of some really powerful enemy ships. I've finally got that elite Gisty Slasher 2 now locked onto, the Slasher 2 Interceptor at 6 kilometers, so I'm now hitting that with the Webifier, with the Scrambler, with the Target Painter, and I've got my drone set onto it, and my turrets. And you see I've done a little bit of a slingshot maneuver there to try and get this one down, because obviously it's a very fast moving target, very small target, very hard to hit. Now, interestingly enough, I also have made the mistake of sticking with the large drone, and you can see there that Elite Gisty Slasher 2 Interceptor is now actually repairing its shields because I'm not able to do any damage to it, even though I'm trying to do the whole slingshot maneuver here to try and get some solid hits on it. I'm getting some slight hits, but not nearly enough to actually push through that shield tank, and I am taking a lot of damage here on my shields, which is beginning to get a little bit scary. The problem is, as I said, here you'll see I've got the large drones out, so I go into the menu and I go to swap to medium drones. Unfortunately, I packed my drone bay with too many of them, and I can't actually swap them around because the large ones are too big for the drone bay. This is causing problems. It means I can't swap to the drones I actually want to use. That's big problems for me there. So I'm going to change my target, I'm going to move away, and I'm going to see if I can start taking out some of the other ships instead. You can see I've gone for another Slasher 2 Interceptor here, and we are going to try and take this one out. That's the other Slasher there. There's the Thrasher Covert Ops. That possibly will be an easier target for me to take. Obviously, I've just got to spend a long time, you can see how long it takes to lock on here, a long time locking on in order to actually, start dealing with this one. And my capacitor's getting dangerously low as well now, sitting at about 35-37%. Here we go, we want to take everything off from the Slasher 2 Interceptor, unless I can finish that off in like a couple of hits here, which I don't think I'm going to be able to. I'm going to swap everything here across to that Thrasher Covert Ops, the second thing that is scramming me. In a worst case scenario here, if things do start to go a bit wrong, I can ultimately just turn around, I can warp out of this fight, regen my shields, etc. at a station, jump back into this fight at say 100 kilometers, and draw the anomaly out into a thin line of targets one by one. But, again, with me being scrambled, I can't do that at this point, so I'm doing the slingshot maneuver here to try and get as much damage now on that Gisty Thrasher Covert Ops as possible in order to get that second scram off me. And you'll see that I'm snaking, I double tap one direction, I wait until the ship starts turning that direction, and I immediately double tap the other direction. This just causes whatever is orbiting me to lose that orbit. It goes into a much more elliptical orbit, and I just need to hope that I can connect a shot whilst they are on the approach or away vectors where their angular velocity is much lower. But there we are, you've seen that's those now dealt with. I have now not got the Scrambler on me. It means I can move a bit further away. You saw there 25 kilometers from the Elite Gisty Slasher 2 Interceptor, 2 shots, and that was taken out of the sky. And we're now moving on to the next one. There is an Elite Gisty Tempest you can see here as well, that I can easily deal with later on. Ultimately, that is not a big threat to me at all at this point. In fact, if things start to get bad, as I said, I can just warp away to safety, recover, and warp back in at extreme range. So I just wanted to showcase here that the Machariel is capable of handling the elites in these waves. This is, as I said, the Tech 10 encounter, the storyline encounter, Angel versus Demon, and we are on part 3 of it, and on wave 3. This is the hardest wave in the entire of the encounter because of those elites, because of how many scrams you get, and ultimately because of how badly I messed up my positioning at the start. But even then, with things looking really bad, by staying calm and trying to slingshot, picking my targets carefully, I'm able to survive that, and as you can see now, my shields are passively regenerating, and I can start looking now to regen capacitor off some of the bigger targets. Like here, I've got this Gist Maelstrom, I can start draining that and refilling my capacitor if needs be, or again, I can warp to safety. Anyway, folks, that about wraps up everything I want to say about the Machariel on live here in EVE Echoes. Obviously, I did a video on this back in the final test. Nice to see that even with the changes that we've had to battleships and to the Machariel itself, that it is still very much a very powerful ship. I adore this battleship. It is probably the only battleship I will ever seriously consider flying, and I do have an alt, obviously, now training into battleships in order to do that. Obviously, what you're seeing here, though, a lot of you have asked, this is based on a test server. The content creators for EVE Echoes have been given access to a test server, which allows us to sort of try out some of these ships as you see them on live, put skill points where we need them in order to showcase. That's why I haven't gone into skills in this video, because ultimately, I'm sitting at Tech 10 level skills. Everything is maxed out here, but ultimately, what you're seeing there is you're getting a full view of what it is like to fly a Machariel with all of the gear, etc. available to it, without me having to actually spend all of my own in-game currency for it. Obviously, it's a test server, though, so my main character and, like, the Cascade Cartel, I get no benefit from this at all. It's just stuff here on the test server. Anyway, folks, that covers everything about the Machariel. Let me know what you think, what your thoughts and opinions are. Which of the faction battleships is your favourite? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Otherwise, thank you for watching right the way to the end. As usual, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.